Hey everyone, Chelsea here from So Simple Home. Today we are making milk jug greenhouses. If you're not aware of what a milk jug greenhouse is, another term would be winter sowing. So those are basically the same thing, but basically we're going to take this milk jug and we're going to cut it open, add soil and our seeds, and we're going to set it outside. Right now it's February where we live. We're in zone 7. So it's still pretty early for anything to sprout and start growing where we are. But we start our milk jugs early and put it out. And as soon as the temperature gets the right heat, these milk jug greenhouses will sprout whatever we are growing. So I like to start early. They can get water in them, they can get snow on them, they can they can sit out in nature for months and months and they'll be just fine. So I have I think 12 milk jugs right now, and then several like water bottles and soda bottles. And so we're going to just plant a few of those today. So I'm just going to show you what the process looks like. So today I'm actually going to start some of my flower seeds because they take a little bit longer, and so I want them out. So these are some zinnia seeds from Eden Brothers. We're going to start some of those, and then a couple of straw flower seeds that I got from Florette. So I'll just kind of show you the process. It's really easy. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a milk jug, and I'm going to take a knife and just cut around the milk jug so that it will pop open and kind of split like this. See how that works? So it'll just split kind of like this. Zoom out just a little bit. There we go. So it'll kind of split like this. Okay. Now, if you don't have milk jugs or you don't you don't use plastic or whatever, that's fine. You can talk to neighbors and friends and family, have them save some for you. I usually start saving my milk jugs in about December, and that's when I kind of start collecting them, or beginning of January. But again, I'm in zone 7, and so we don't actually plant in our soil in the ground until about mid to the end of May typically. But if I start my milk jugs, usually by the beginning of April, mid-April, they've started to sprout. And so it just gives me, 20 to 30 days, maybe a little bit more, depending on the weather, of extra time for my seeds to start growing. All right. So I have just filled up my milk jug with soil, and this soil is already mixed with water, so it's really moist. You want to start with a moist soil. You don't want to start with it super wet. Oh, the other thing I didn't do, and I always forget this step, is you want to punch some holes in the bottom so that there's some drainage. So we'll just take this here and poke a few. That step I always forget. Okay, so there's my milk jug with the soil. Get this out of the way so it's not distracting us. And we're going to go ahead and start with some straw flower. Now these are candy pink. They're really pretty. I actually planted these a couple of years ago, so I don't have a ton of seed here. But I'm going to go ahead, and with these, I'm actually just going to kind of sprinkle them on the top, just so that they're spread apart just a bit. Okay, put the extras back in. And then I'm just going to sprinkle just a little bit of soil on the top. Okay, because I don't really want these super covered. Just enough that they are protected, but not enough that they're going to be buried too deep. So now I'm going to take some popsicle sticks and I'm going to label this. And so I'm going to just label it candy pink straw flower. Okay, candy pink straw flower. And I'm just going to put that right in my milk jug. That way I know what it is. I'm also going to label the exterior candy pink straw flower. I do both because sometimes, well, all the time, eventually the sun will start to deteriorate the marker on the actual milk jug, and so the stick inside just helps me know when I open it up what it is if I can't already tell. You know, some things you can tell pretty easily because you've been planting them for a long time, and other things take a little bit more. All right, now I'm going to take some duct tape, and this is always the part that is interesting. Duct tape works the best, but I'm going to tape up this hole that I've made, or this cut that I've made in my milk jug. And sometimes I have to put 2 layers of duct tape on because you want just this opening. You don't want a bunch of openings around the side. Like right here, you can kind of see it's open, and some of that's just because of the moisture, and the duct tape's just not sticking great, and that's fine. But we want to try and get as much of this closed up as we can. Let's see if I can push it out just a little bit. And if you have to come in later and close it up, that's fine. But you just want it closed up the best you can. And it doesn't always work perfect, but you just don't want a ton of air and moisture getting in there. You just want enough that it kind of gives that greenhouse effect, right? It's nice and warm inside, and other things can't get in and out except for basically through the top. So there is my little milk jug greenhouse. So it's all ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and do some of my other milk jugs, and then I will show you where I put them during the next couple of months and kind of how I take care of them. All right, so I'm back in my little milk jug garden here. I just want to show you kind of what it looks like. So this is our pump house here. And we just have these little garden mortars that we got years ago and really didn't use. They were just kind of sitting around, and I thought, hey, this would be perfect for containing my milk jugs. Why do I contain them? We get a lot of wind out here, and if I just put my milk jugs out, they will tip over, and then the seeds either come out or they get buried too deep and they never germinate. So you don't want that. That's a bad thing. So this works really well. If you don't have something like this, you could put some crates around it. I mean, you can make a makeshift little cage, if you will, but that's totally up to you. So I'm just bringing up the last of the milk jugs that I'm doing today. Obviously, this is a soda pop bottle. These soda pop bottles work really, really well for milk jug garden. They make a nice little greenhouse. They seem to stay a little bit warmer, at least in my opinion, than the milk jugs. So I like these have peppers. I planted my pepper plants in here. So they seem to do really well in those clear plastic containers. Some other things you can use, just plastic water bottles. If you have like soda kind of bottles, you know, Coke bottles would work. This is just like a little Gatorade bottle. So a lot of people are like, well, we don't have milk jugs. Where would we find milk jugs? You don't need a milk jug. You can just find any other plastic container. So if there's like a recycling program at the school or at your work or whatever, you can go through, pull those plastic containers out, and they work really well. So here's all of my milk jugs, and I'm just going to take another one of these little borders, garden borders. I'm going to go this way, and I'm just going to kind of trap these milk jugs in this section. That way, if the wind comes through, it might blow these milk jugs or these water bottles, but they won't fall over. And that's just something that works for me. I also like this spot next to our pump house because it gets a lot of sun. So this is the morning sun, and it'll continue all the way and set and it'll have sun that whole time. There's no shade really in this spot as the spring comes in. And so that's another reason I really like this spot, because it gives these milk jugs a lot of warmth so that they get a lot of sunlight and they produce the moisture that they need. Now, one other thing that I'll do, probably once a week, I will come out with a spray bottle and spray inside each of these containers to make sure there's enough moisture. If there's not moisture beating inside of my milk jug, it's not going to germinate because there's air getting in somehow that's drying out the soil. So you don't want that. So you'll spray them at least once a week, and then when they start to germinate or it starts warming up, then I come out almost daily and check on them and give them a squirt or two of water from the water bottle. Sometimes I'll pull my hose out if it's warm enough and spray them down as well. You just want to make sure they do not dry out, or else your seeds will not germinate and your plants will die. And once those plants have started growing, just make sure they're getting a good amount of moisture and that the moisture is beating inside of the milk jug. So this is just the beginning of the process, and I'll show you down the road how they're doing, and you can kind of see how my milk jug garden works. Great, so I'm just coming down here to our pump house. This is where we keep my winter sown vegetables. A little garden, and there's some flowers in here too, but you can see I have put some fencing around. That's partially to keep the chickens out, although they don't really bother it, but more so because we get a lot of wind. So the wind comes in from over here and blows really strong, and that just keeps them all in place. But I've got all sorts of things. I've got tomatoes over here, a bunch of different squash. I have corn up front. I have these little milk jugs that actually I was just trying out, and they've done really well. This one I think is a cucumber. I think that's actually another cucumber. It's hard to see. Anyway, so you can see all of them growing here. Let me just poke you in the tops here. This is marigolds. So let's see, where's my camera? Okay, there's some marigolds that are growing. This one is corn, doing really well. Let me see where this one is green beans, I believe. Oh no, I lied. This one are baby pumpkins, little Jill Be Little pumpkins. This here is my green beans. So you can see they're all growing really well, and I haven't had to do anything other than water them. I find that squash is doing really, really well in these. This is one of our winter sown jugs. I've already taken the tape off. This is a spaghetti squash. You can see my stick. And it's got a little bit of like sun damage is what I would say. Just got a little too warm because we're in the full sun. But you can see here, 1, 2, 3 beautiful little plants sown right here in this milk jug, ready to go. Okay, here is one of the jugs that I opened on the front. This is corn. It's doing really well. I'm gonna let it sit in here for a little bit. You can always cut around and pop it open like the spaghetti squash over here. I'm just gonna do this and see how it goes, if they'll harden up. I mean, they're really healthy already and strong. I mean, they're really great. So they're not going to need a lot of hardening up, but I do want to make sure they get a little bit wind tough. So I may end up cutting around the top. I might tape this closed and cut around the middle so it pops open like this one, but it'll work either way. But you can see here I have lots of different jugs of different things over here. This is actually one of my favorites. This is a giant piece of plastic that my husband got our electric fence piece for, and it's kind of hard to see. You can see here this way a little bit. It keeps the moisture really well. There's several squash plants in here. I think it's a Cinderella pumpkin, and there's these two watermelons that are in there as well. So winter sowing is really easy. I just enclosed my jugs here to keep the wind away. That just kind of helps. Once your plants have fully grown in their milk jugs or soda bottles, you can pull them out after hardening up for a little bit and plant them in the ground. Winter sowing is a great way to start your garden.